This list is taken from an inventory by a psychologist by the name of Polak. And it's a good list of all the things that you might find that you experience. Things like, do you ever feel that you have succeeded on a test or a task even though you were afraid you wouldn't? Did you ever feel that you give the impression to other people that you're more competent than you actually are? Do you ever avoid evaluations, 360 feedback sessions? Do you fear that you won't be able to live up to people's expectations in the future? Do you think that you obtained your present position through sheer good luck or some kind of administrative error? Do you fear that important people will find out that you're not as capable as they seem to think you are? Do you find yourself ruminating over incidents in the past in which you haven't done your best? Do you fear that others will discover how much knowledge or ability you really lack? When you do achieve, when you do get an accolade, when you do get praise, do you discount the importance of what you've achieved? You say things like, oh, I didn't really deserve it, or it was the rest of the team, or it was just luck really, or I was just in the right place at the right time. Do you find that you assume that those around you, the people sitting around in the meeting, the people having the discussion in the team, do you assume that they all know more than you do and that you're just winging it? Do you ever hide your successes and achievements? Do you have trophies, or did you receive certificates, or did you get acknowledgements, but then don't tell people about it? You don't tell your friends, you don't tell your family because, you don't feel you really deserved it. Does that sum you up? I'm going to play, so I'm sort of bringing up, I'm aware that, if you suffer from something like imposter syndrome, you're now feeling quite tense, quite anxious. You're going, oh no, he's onto me. He's figured it out. And you might also be going, oh, actually, that is how I think, that is how I feel. And this is actually a thing. Okay, this is interesting. So this is, it's just quite a long little video, and I don't normally play videos in my webinars, but this one's really good, and it really does both sum up what this imposter syndrome is, plus it also talks about why we have an imposter syndrome.
In many challenges, personal and...
Charlotte, can you just confirm that you can hear that? Fantastic.
Professional, we are held back by the crippling thought that people like us couldn't possibly triumph given what we know of ourselves, how reliably stupid, anxious, gauche, crude, vulgar, and dull we really are. We leave the possibility of success to others because we don't seem to ourselves to be anything like the sort of people we see lauded around us. Faced with responsibility or prestige, we quickly become convinced that we are simply imposters, like an actor in the role of a pilot, wearing the uniform and making sunny cabin announcements while utterly incapable of even starting the engines. It can feel easier simply not to try. The root cause of the imposter syndrome is a hugely unhelpful picture of what other people are really like. We feel like imposters not because we're uniquely flawed, but because we fail to imagine how deeply flawed everyone else must necessarily also be beneath a more or less polished surface. The imposter syndrome has its roots far back in childhood, specifically in the powerful sense children have that their parents are really very different from them. To a 4-year-old, it's incomprehensible that their mother was once their age and unable to drive a car, tell the plumber what to do, decide other people's bedtimes, and go on planes with colleagues. The gulf in status appears absolute and unbridgeable. The child's passionate loves, pouncing on the sofa, Pingu, Toblerone, have nothing to do with those of adults who like to sit at a table talking for hours when they could be running about outside and drink beer which tastes of rusty metal. We start out in life with a very strong impression that other people, especially competent and admirable other people, are really not like us at all. This childhood experience dovetails with a basic feature of the human condition. We know ourselves from the inside, but we know others only from the outside. So we're constantly aware of all our anxieties, doubts, and idiocies. Yet all we know of others is what they happen to do and tell us, which is a far narrower and more edited source of information. We're often left to conclude that we are isolated at the more freakish and revolting end of human nature. Far from it. We're just failing to imagine that others are, of course, every bit as disturbed as we are. Without knowing exactly what it is that troubles or racks another outwardly very impressive person, we can be sure that it will be something. We might not know exactly what they regret, but there will be agonizing feelings of some kind. We won't be able to say exactly what kind of unusual sexual kink obsesses them, but there will be one. And we can know this because vulnerabilities and compulsions cannot be curses that have just descended upon us uniquely. They are universal features of human mental equipment. The solution to the imposter syndrome lies in making a crucial leap of faith, the leap that others' minds must work in basically much the same way as ours do. Everyone must be as anxious, uncertain, and wayward as we are. It's a leap of faith because we just have to accept that the majority of what we feel and are, especially the more shameful, unmentionable sides, will have a corollary in each and every one of us. One of the tasks that works of art should ideally accomplish is to take us more reliably into the minds of people we're intimidated by, in order to show us the more average, muddled, and fretful experiences that in many challenges.
All right, might leave that there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. I was just having some people where they're having issues seeing the slides updating. So I wonder if we could go back to inside the Webinar Ninja platform and use that method.
Oh, okay. We need to upload then. Okay. So the slide. So people won't see the slides flip over.
I think it's working for some and not for others. If you could put in the chat whether it's working for you, just so I can get an understanding of how many people it's not working for. Oh, it seems to be working for quite a few people.
Okay, because it takes a moment to upload. That's the challenge.
Okay, I think majority it's working for. So we might actually have to stick with what we're currently doing. For those of you that it's not working for, you will get a recording where it will all be working fine. So really sorry about that inconvenience, but you will receive a recording.
That's okay. Hopefully you got to see the video there, or at least hear the video, even if it's not working
Yeah.
for you. So what can you see? Not really a syndrome now?
Yeah, that's all working now.
Okay.
Perfect.
Right.
Roger,
We apologise to people that it's not working for. We normally don't have videos that we try and input, and that's something to do with our webinar system. Okay. So the next bit is to just to acknowledge that it's not really a syndrome. A syndrome refers to an actual diagnosable disease, and imposter syndrome is not a diagnosable disease. In the psychological literature and scientific literature, it's actually referred to as imposter phenomenon. So it's a phenomenon. It's also known as imposter experience. It was originally studied in highly successful women. Women who had, and back in the sort of the 70s when this was first studied, it was a really small pool of women who had managed to get to really high positions in very, very male-dominated fields. And of course, at that time, every field was a completely male-dominated field. And these women consistently describe this experience of, how did I get here? I shouldn't be here. I don't belong here. They're going to find me out, and they're going to realize that I shouldn't be here, and they're going to reject me. They're not going to accept me. And so it's an experience. What we know about it nowadays is that it's experienced very commonly. In fact, it's experienced by about 70 to 75% of people on a fairly regular basis. What that does is that makes it normal. It makes it more common than not, and I think that information is very, very powerful. And it tends to be worse for people that find themselves in the minority at the workplace. So if you're the youngest person in your work environment, then you will think that you will have a sense of not belonging and that you are some kind of imposter. If you are a minority who has, in a minority, so if you're from an ethnic minority, or if you're a woman, or if you're from a sexual identity minority, and you're given a position and you're kind of the only one like you in your workplace, you are also going to have a greater chance of experiencing this phenomenon. You're going to have this feeling of, I don't fit, I don't belong, there must be some kind of mistake. Or sometimes if people are from a minority, they'll have a feeling of, well, I only got the job because I'm from this particular ethnic group, and they wanted someone like that in on this position. Or they only gave me this job because I'm a woman and there's not enough women on board positions, and so they're trying to fill that up. But maybe, I'm not really good enough, I don't really belong.
I have a question from Fiona saying, is it experienced in some countries or cultures more than others?
No, it's not.
Can you be more
So
than one of
what I
these
talked about is the
types?
what we know is that the standout difference is it's not cultural. It's more that if you are from an other culture, then you are more likely to experience it. So in a predominantly white Australia, if you're from an other culture, then kind of you're white Anglo-Saxon, and you're in a role, and all the other people in your level in an organization are from the white Anglo-Saxon culture, then you are more likely to have this feeling of, okay, maybe I'm an imposter here. Maybe they gave me the job for the wrong reasons. Maybe they've made a mistake. Maybe this isn't really what I deserve. And so the essence of it is, and this is kind of the most common picture you'll see in relation to imposter syndrome, and it's the best way, it's a really good way of describing what goes on, and it was described in that video there. It's this feeling that I know a little bit, and that's been enough to get me here. But as I look around the room, all the other people seem to know so much more about this than I do. And it really quickly leads to this kind of linking thinking of, so what right do I have to be here? What value can I possibly offer? How can I possibly make a valuable contribution in this space? Dr. Valerie Young has been a researcher in this area, and she's sort of identified different types of imposter syndrome, which also explains kind of the where and the why this has emerged in particular people. And she talks about the perfectionist, the natural genius, the expert, the soloist, the superwoman, superman. And you might be able to identify this in yourself. If you're a perfectionist and you expect to do everything perfectly, and you do something and it's not perfect, then your thought pattern can go to, then I must be a fraud. Yeah, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't as good as I thought it should be, and so I'm not enough. Then there's the natural genius, someone who actually throughout their childhood, and I actually fall into this category, everything came easily and quickly to me. High school was a bit of a breeze, and then I got to university and I started studying calculus, and I was like, oh my God, I'm completely lost. And it looked like everyone else knew what they were doing. And I thought, oh, well, I'm stupid. And clearly I'm just an idiot. The expert is the person who expects to know. I suffer from this one a bit too. In fact, I suffer from a few of these. I expect to know everything already. I've got one of my sons is this is like this. Like, oh, I don't know how to do it. I don't know what that's about. So can't do it. I'm useless. It's no good. And yet, if you're in a job where you're kind of holding on to the job, you have this feeling, oh my God, I'm an idiot, and they don't know it. So I'm just tricking everybody. The soloist believes that they can always do what they need to do on their own. They don't need anybody else. But then they have a job where actually they do need help from other people, and they're not used to reaching out for it. And that feeling of I need help from other people, I need some answers, I need some support, I need some input from other people, leads to that feeling of obviously I'm not enough, I don't belong here, I must be a fraud. And then the superwoman, superman, who's always been able to do anything and conquers any mountain. And then when they get that thing that they can't do, boom, not good enough, I must be a fraud. So yeah, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I reckon I'm the natural genius, expert, soloist, and a little bit of Superman, Superwoman. So you can have a little bit of it in all of you. a little bit of each in you. Or you might find, oh yeah, I'm kind of, I know plenty of people who are the perfectionist. So yeah, it's not a personality trait. It's more kind of looking at, well, what are the sources? What are the kind of the self-identifications that you might have that might lead you to feeling this imposter syndrome.
And Lisa also had a question. How do you know if it's imposter syndrome versus feelings of low self-esteem and self-worth? She's asking, is it also
because they're the same. You don't need to differentiate. Yeah, because one of the consequences of imposter syndrome is low self-esteem, and one of the consequences of low self-esteem is imposter syndrome. So there's no need to say this is one or the other. Often, if you have low self-esteem, you will feel this experience. And remember, it's the imposter experience or the imposter phenomenon. You will have a sense of, how did I get this job? I don't deserve this job. How much are they paying me? Why are they paying me that much? There must be some kind of mistake here. Yeah. So if you've got low self-esteem and you're successful, then that's essentially the recipe for imposter syndrome. And these are the negative consequences. And I've put here, these are the consequences, but they shouldn't be. This is kind of the problem with imposter syndrome. People who experience it, they hold back in meetings, they don't share their ideas, they won't apply for that promotion. They'll constantly question their own decision making, and they'll have this constant background of negative self-talk that I'm not enough, I don't belong, I shouldn't be here. They're thinking about me. They're about to sack me. Here comes the boss now. He's going to tell me that I haven't got my job anymore. Why did he ask if I wanted a coffee? Okay, it doesn't make any sense. So this background noise and this kind of it becomes an impediment to being the effective person that you actually are. The underlying stuff where it gets problematic and where that question around self-esteem really starts to snowball and spiral out of control is when we sort of allow that shame and guilt to lead to anxiety and ultimately lead to depression if we can let our imposter syndrome go unchecked.
Imposter syndrome that you're afraid to ask of what you think you deserve because you think you don't have the right to ask for it in the first place, e.g. a promotion or a pay rise?
Possibly. It could be a version it's a version of some kind of self-belief about deserving. It's interesting the way that you frame the question around not asking for what you deserve, because I would suggest that there's kind of a conflict in there, that on one hand you believe that you deserve it, but actually there's a part of you that doesn't believe you do deserve it, and that's the conflict or the tension. Feel free to clarify that. So in terms of the upside, and I think that this is about sort of flipping it, and a lot of this, where I'm going now, is about how do you flip this? And part of flipping it is to go, what? There's a lot of, if you experience this sense of imposter syndrome, then it means a lot of really good things about you. It means that you're the kind of person who actually likes to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Because if you let that imposter feeling dominate you and control you, you wouldn't be experiencing it. You'd just be the janitor. You'd be working at still be working at the checkout at Coles, but you haven't. You've gone, you know what? I'm going to try and do better than this. I'm going to try for more. I'm going to try and go for that next position, that next role. Another lovely story I heard was that one of Australia's most successful entrepreneurs started with nothing, ended up making billions of dollars, and actually funded the massive solar farm and energy bank in South Australia that was put together by Elon Musk. And he was talking about sort of going to all these award ceremonies, and ending up in Europe at a international Entrepreneur of the Year award, sitting next to another entrepreneur from another country who had $1 billion company with thousands of employees. And he said, he said to the guy, I don't know what I'm doing here, and how did I get here? And at some stage, someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and tell me to go home. And the other guy turned to him and said, I feel that way too. And he said this is another TED talk he said he realized in that moment that it didn't matter how successful you weren't going to shake this feeling. It didn't matter how much money you had or how many employees or how many accolades, the feeling would persist. And so it means you're human if you feel this way. And it also means that you're humble. It means that you have humility, that you don't have grandiose expectations of yourself. It means that you're willing to listen to others and learn from others and learn from your own experiences and learn from their experiences. It means that you're motivated to work harder and try harder, that you're motivated to fill the shoes that you're now wearing. It also means that you can be compassionate towards other people, knowing that they're doing their best and they might still be struggling to feel good about themselves, even though everybody else thinks that they're doing a really great job. So we've got some quick tips, just a few minutes left around what to do. And this is sort of taking that original image of, what you know versus what you think other people know. And realizing that the truth is that it's more equal than not. That everyone else in the room is just like you, that they're literally making it up as they go along. Another tip is to embrace your fears. Sometimes we feel like fear is the enemy. This idea, I shouldn't be afraid, it's bad to be afraid. Well, not true. When we are taking risks, if you're an entrepreneur and you're putting yourself out in the market, or if you're putting yourself, even now I'm taking a risk. This isn't done without fear. There's fear involved in saying, here I am, I'm going to talk about imposter syndrome. I've got imposter syndrome. There's fear involved in that. And there's also a lot of value in facing our fears and using our fear to motivate us. There's a lovely sort of, when you look at emotion, it's E equals MC squared from physics, what's his name? That Einstein, that energy, that's the E for energy, and emotion is talking about the energy for motion. So you have fear. So fear, we can turn that fear into the energy we need to do what we need to do. And we can use it, and we can also retrain our thinking. We can try and I'll just refer you to the Uprise modules if you have access to them, because we have a couple of modules there that are very specifically around retraining your thinking using the cognitive behavioral therapy model. Also, the gratitude, if you're suffering from imposter syndrome, you're looking at what other people have and imagining what you don't have and imagining that they have more than what you do. So one of the antidotes is to look back at yourself and to go, okay, what have I got? What do I do well? Well, what I do well is I put together presentations pretty well. I sit and listen to people pretty well. I'm really passionate about communicating these ideas. I'm really passionate about listening to people and hearing what's in them. I'm driven to make changes in the world. I don't want to change a lot of things in the world, but there's some things in the world that I get angry about and I want to change them, and that drives me to keep on going, no matter how scared I am and no matter how much I think that there must be other people that are better off to do that. And I do have knowledge. I don't have all the knowledge in the world, but I've got the knowledge that I've got, and it needs to be enough to do what I'm going to do. Focus on doing what needs to be done. What's the task at hand? Just do it. Sometimes you feel stuck. Sometimes you feel like it's overwhelming, but just focus on getting it done, because that will then lead to, sorry, everybody. What will that lead to in terms of what do I need to do? Who do I need to talk to? What do I need to research? What else do I need to draw upon in order to get that thing done? And value your difference. Not everyone likes doing presentations on a webinar. Not everyone likes talking about things related to psychology and human experience. Not many people like sitting and listening to people all day long, and yet I do. So learn to value what comes naturally to you. If you're still plagued by these feelings, then share your feelings with someone you can trust: friends, family, colleague, manager. And if you feel like, sometimes it feels so frightening, you don't want to share it with anyone. I'm pretty sure that the client that I was working with, the only person he'd sort of shared his fears with were me. And that's often the case. But you reach out to the EAP or talk to a counsellor or a psychologist and say, you know what, this is how I feel. Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending the webinar today. If there's any more questions, I'll pop them in the chat. The key takeaways is that realizing that most people experience the imposter phenomenon. It's more common than it is not. that what you know and what other people know is more similar than you might think. It's equivalent, and they might have more knowledge in some areas, but you're going to have more knowledge and experience in other areas. Learn to embrace your fears. Don't be afraid of fear. Remember the skills and knowledge you do have, and trust your feelings.